Dr. Kim Hana wiped the red dust from her gloves as she knelt beside the strange object buried in the Martian ice. She had been digging at this site for 3 months, and this was the deepest she had ever gone. The thing in front of her looked like a giant crystal, but it was not like any crystal she had seen before. It was smooth and clear, with strange patterns inside that seemed to move when she looked at them. "What do you think it is?" asked Park Min-ho, her partner on the dig. He was supposed to be there for security, but mostly he just helped her carry heavy equipment and made sure she did not get lost in the caves. Hana shook her head. "I have never seen anything like it. Look at these markings on the side. They are not natural. Someone made this thing." The crystal was about the size of a car, sitting in a chamber that someone had carved out of the rock long ago. The walls around it were covered in symbols that did not match any human writing system. Hana had studied ancient languages for 15 years, but these symbols were completely foreign to her. She pulled out her scanner and ran it over the surface of the crystal. The readings made no sense. The scanner said the object was older than the solar system itself, which was impossible. It also said the crystal was giving off energy, but a type of energy that human science had never discovered. "Maybe we should call the base," Min-ho said. He was nervous, which was unusual for him. In the 5 years they had worked together, she had never seen him afraid of anything. "Not yet," Hana said. "Let me take a few more readings first." She moved closer to the crystal and noticed that the patterns inside were moving faster now. They swirled and danced like smoke, but smoke made of light. Without thinking, she reached out and touched the surface with her bare hand. The moment her skin made contact with the crystal, the entire chamber filled with bright blue light. Hana stumbled backward, but the light followed her. It wrapped around her body like water, but she could not feel it. Min-ho shouted her name, but his voice sounded far away. Then the crystal began to speak. Not with words exactly, but with thoughts that appeared directly in her mind. Images flooded her consciousness. She saw stars and planets she had never imagined. She saw cities floating in space and creatures that looked like living rainbows. She saw ships the size of mountains traveling between the stars. "Welcome," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have been waiting for you." The blue light faded, and suddenly the chamber was full of figures made of light. They were not quite solid like holograms, but more real than any hologram she had ever seen. There were dozens of them, all different shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human, but with extra arms or eyes in strange places. Others looked like giant insects or plants or things that had no comparison to anything on Earth. One of them stepped forward. It looked like a tall human woman, but her skin was silver and her eyes were solid black. "Do not be afraid," the figure said. And now Hana could hear the words with her ears instead of just in her mind. "We are the hegemony. We represent 847 civilizations from across the galaxy." Min-ho had pulled out his weapon, but he was not pointing it at anyone. He just held it in his hands and stared at the figures with his mouth open. "You are humans from the planet Earth," the silver woman continued. "We have been monitoring your species for many years, waiting for you to reach the proper level of development. That time has now come." "Development for what?" Hana asked. Her voice came out as a whisper. "To join us," said another figure, this one looking like a tree with arms and a face in its trunk. "Your species has shown the intelligence and curiosity necessary to become part of our great community. This device you have found is a communication hub, left here long ago for you to discover when you were ready." The crystal began to glow again, and suddenly the air above it filled with images. Hana saw star maps showing thousands of solar systems. She saw planets covered in cities and farms. She saw ships moving between the stars like fish swimming through an ocean. "All of this can be yours," the silver woman said. "Technology beyond your wildest dreams. Planets where your people can live and grow. Knowledge that will solve every problem your species has ever faced." "What do you want in return?" Min-ho asked. He had found his voice, but he still held his weapon ready. The figures looked at each other, and Hana thought she saw something pass between them. A look that made her stomach feel cold. "Peace," said the tree-like figure. "All we ask is that you commit to peace." The chamber fell silent except for the quiet humming of the crystal. Hana looked at the star maps floating in the air and felt her heart racing. Everything humanity had ever dreamed of was being offered to them. The stars themselves were within reach. But something in the way the figures had looked at each other made her wonder if this gift came with a price they had not yet mentioned. 6 months after the discovery on Mars, massive ships appeared in Earth's sky. They were unlike anything humans had ever built. Each ship was the size of a city, made of the same smooth material as the crystal Hana had found. They moved without making any sound, floating above major cities around the world like silver clouds. Ambassador Lee Soo-jin stood in the United Nations building in New York, watching through the windows as one of the giant ships hovered over Manhattan. She had been chosen to speak for humanity because she could speak 12 languages and had worked with difficult negotiations before. But nothing had prepared her for this. The assembly hall was packed with leaders from every country on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists all sat in nervous silence. At the front of the room, a large screen had been set up. Dr. Kim Hana sat at a control panel, ready to activate the communication system they had built using technology from the Mars crystal. "Are we ready?" Soo-jin asked. Hana nodded and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly the room was filled with the same blue light they had seen on Mars. The holographic figures materialized in front of the assembled world, leaders just as real as they had been in the Martian cave. The Silver Woman stepped forward just as she had before, but this time she was not alone. Dozens of other figures stood behind her, representing species from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human, others were completely alien. One looked like a giant jellyfish floating in the air. Another was made of what appeared to be living metal. "Leaders of Earth," the Silver Woman said, her voice filling the hall. "We are honored to formally welcome humanity into the hegemony. Your species has shown great promise, and we are here to offer you gifts that will change your world forever." She gestured, and the air above the assembly became filled with images. Soo-jin watched in amazement as she saw machines that could turn desert into farmland in a matter of days. She saw medical devices that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for thousands of years. She saw power sources that could provide unlimited energy without pollution. "This is just the beginning," said the jellyfish-like creature. Its voice sounded like music. "We offer you the stars themselves. There are thousands of planets waiting for human colonization. Worlds with perfect climates, rich resources, and no dangerous native life." Colonel Yang Taiho sat in the back of the hall, taking notes on everything he saw. He was in charge of Earth's military response to the alien contact, and something about this presentation made him uncomfortable. The gifts were amazing, but they seemed too good to be true. "What do you require from us in return?" asked the President of the United States. The Silver Woman smiled, but her black eyes remained cold. "Very little. We ask only that humanity commit to the same principles that have brought peace to our 847 member civilizations. You must agree to resolve all conflicts through negotiation, rather than violence. You must place the good of the galactic community above the interests of individual nations or groups." "That sounds reasonable," said the Secretary General of the United Nations. "There is one more thing," added the metal creature. "To ensure lasting peace, all member species must surrender their weapons of war to hegemony oversight. Your military forces will be replaced by peacekeeping units trained and equipped by us." The hall erupted in whispers and arguments. Colonel Yang stood up. "You want us to give up our ability to defend ourselves? You will not need to defend yourselves," the Silver Woman replied calmly. "The hegemony will provide all necessary protection. This is how we have maintained peace across the galaxy for over 10,000 years." Soo-jin felt a chill run down her spine. She had spent her career studying how nations interact with each other, and she knew that the promise of protection often came with a loss of freedom. "What happens if we refuse this condition?" The holographic figures looked at each other. For a moment, their perfect composure seemed to crack slightly. "We hope that will not be necessary to discuss," the Silver Woman said. "Surely humanity can see the benefits of joining a peaceful galactic community." Colonel Yang was not satisfied. "But what if we say no?" This time the pause was longer. The metal creature stepped forward. "Species that cannot commit to peace are problematic. They disrupt the harmony we have worked so hard to create. Such species require special handling." "What kind of special handling?" Sujin asked. "Isolation," the jellyfish creature said, its musical voice now sounding somehow sad. "For the protection of peaceful species, aggressive civilizations must be contained until they can be properly rehabilitated." The word rehabilitated hung in the air like a threat. Sujin noticed that several of the world leaders were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The gifts the hegemony offered were wonderful, but the price was becoming clearer. "We will need time to consider your offer," Sujin said carefully. "Of course," the Silver Woman replied. "But do not take too long. The galaxy is a dangerous place for species that stand alone. It would be unfortunate if humanity made the wrong choice." The holograms faded away, leaving the assembly hall in stunned silence. Above them, through the windows, the massive ships continued to hover motionlessly over the city, beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a promise and a threat wrapped in silver metal. Colonel Yang looked at his notes and frowned. Something about this invitation felt more like an ultimatum than an offer of friendship. Dr. Kim Hana floated in the zero-gravity library aboard the Hegemony research station. For 3 months, she had been studying the historical records of member species, using access privileges granted to her as Earth's official xenoarchaeologist. What she found in those records made her stomach turn cold. She pulled up another file on her floating tablet. The Zelthari had been a proud warrior race with a strong tradition of individual combat and personal honor. Their historical records, from before joining the hegemony, showed a civilization of artists, philosophers, and fierce fighters who valued freedom above safety. The records from after they joined were very different. Within 50 years of integration, the Zelthari had become docile factory workers. Their art had disappeared. Their philosophy focused only on group harmony. Their warriors had been retrained as agricultural specialists. The change was so complete that it looked like they had become a completely different species. Hana scrolled through more files. The Vorthak had been explorers and inventors, always pushing into dangerous unknown regions of space. After joining the hegemony, they became content farmers who never traveled beyond their home system. The Kalani had been fierce traders who competed aggressively for the best deals. Now they processed raw materials in orbital factories and never questioned their assignments. Every single species followed the same pattern. Before joining the hegemony, they had been diverse, competitive, and independent. After integration, they all became peaceful, cooperative, and completely dependent on hegemony guidance. Hana activated her secure communicator and sent an encrypted message to Colonel Yang Taiho back on Earth. The message would take several hours to reach him through the communication relay, but she could not wait any longer to share what she had discovered. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Eden, things were not going as planned. Colony Administrator Park Jinsu was having another argument with his hegemony liaison, a tall blue creature called Supervisor Kelm. "I do not understand why our people cannot keep their hunting rifles," Park said. "We need them to control the native wildlife. Some of these animals are dangerous." Supervisor Kelm's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "Weapons are not necessary. The hegemony will provide safe zones where your people can live without danger. Hunting for food is also not necessary. We will provide all nutritional requirements." "But hunting is part of our culture," Park protested. "Many of our colonists came here specifically because they wanted to live off the land. Culture must adapt to peaceful coexistence," Kelm replied. "Individual desires that conflict with community safety cannot be permitted. This is standard procedure for all member species." Park felt frustrated. When they had first arrived on New Eden 6 months ago, The hegemony representatives had encouraged human cultural expression. Now every week brought new restrictions. No weapons, no independent exploration beyond designated areas, no direct communication with other human colonies, without hegemony approval. Back on Earth, Colonel Yang received Hana's message while sitting in his secure office at military headquarters. As he read her findings, his face grew darker with each paragraph. He immediately called an emergency meeting with Ambassador Li, Sujin. They are not preserving these species, Yang told Sujin as they met in a soundproof room. They are domesticating them. Look at these patterns. Every civilization loses its competitive spirit within a generation. Every species becomes completely dependent on hegemony management. Sujin studied the data Hana had sent. But they all seem happy in the records, content with their lives. Exactly, Yang said grimly. Content. Not happy, not fulfilled, just content. Like cattle in a field. They have everything they need and no desire for anything more. Sujin felt a chill. Are you saying the hegemony is deliberately destroying these civilizations? Not destroying, converting. They take species that might challenge their authority and turn them into harmless workers. Think about it. 847 member species, and not one of them has ever disagreed with hegemony policy. Not one has ever left the organization. Not one has ever caused any trouble at all. Yang pulled up another file on his computer. I have been analyzing the integration treaties more carefully. Every species that joins gives up the same things. Weapons, independent research, free communication, the right to explore beyond assigned territories. By the time the process is complete, they are not civilizations anymore. They are just employees. Meanwhile, on the space station, Hana discovered something even more disturbing. Hidden deep in the historical archives was a section marked Failed Integrations. She needed special permission to access it, which she had obtained by claiming it was necessary for her research into human cultural adaptation. The files told the story of species that had refused to integrate properly. The Corvani had been a militant race that refused to give up their weapons. The hegemony had quarantined their entire solar system, cutting off all contact with the outside galaxy. After 200 years of isolation, the Corvani had died out, completely. The Talani had tried to maintain their independence while accepting hegemony membership. They had been declared corrupted and relocated to prison worlds where they slowly forgot their original culture. Their children were raised in hegemony schools and taught to be ashamed of their parents' rebellious nature. Hana realized with growing horror that humanity was being offered the same choice these species had faced. Submit completely to hegemony, control or be eliminated as a threat to galactic peace. There was no middle ground, there was no compromise. There was only surrender or destruction. She began composing another message to Colonel Yang, her hands shaking as she typed. Humanity needed to know the truth before it was too late. The emergency session of the World Council lasted 18 hours. Ambassador Li Sujin sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted as representatives from every major nation argued about humanity's response to the hegemony. Colonel Yang had presented Dr. Hana's findings to the assembled leaders, and the room had erupted in heated debate. We cannot give up our military, declared the Russian representative. A nation without the ability to defend itself is not a nation at all. But look at what they are offering us, countered the Brazilian delegate. Clean energy, medical miracles, planets for our children. Maybe peace is worth the price. Yang slammed his hand on the table. It is not peace they are offering. It is slavery dressed up to look like paradise. Every species that has joined them has lost everything that made them who they were. Sujin raised her hand for silence. The vote has been taken. By a margin of 63 to 37, humanity rejects the complete disarmament clause. We will accept hegemony membership, but we will keep our military forces. 3 days later, the response came. The Silver Woman appeared on every communication screen on Earth simultaneously. Her holographic image flickered in living rooms, offices, military bases, and government buildings around the world. Humanity has made an unfortunate choice, she said, her black eyes colder than space. Your refusal to embrace complete peace marks you as a contaminated species. You pose a threat to the stability of our galactic community." The image shifted to show the massive hegemony ships that had been hovering peacefully above Earth cities. Panels opened along their hulls, revealing weapon systems that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies are under quarantine. You will have no contact with other galactic civilizations until proper rehabilitation can be administered. Any attempt to leave your designated areas will be met with appropriate force. The transmission ended, and suddenly every human settlement beyond Earth found itself surrounded by hegemony patrol ships. On New Eden, Colony Administrator Park Jinsu watched through his office window as silver vessels took positions around their planet like a cage of metal and light. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we have lost contact with Earth. The communication relay has been shut down." Park tried to reach the other human colonies, but those channels were dead, too. Humanity had been cut off from itself, scattered across dozens of worlds with no way to coordinate or communicate. But the hegemony had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated human stubbornness and ingenuity. Colonel Yang stood in a hidden asteroid base that officially did not exist. For 2 years he had been secretly building ships and training crews using resources diverted from public military projects. When the quarantine began, he had 30 vessels hidden throughout the solar system and beyond. "They think they have us trapped," he told his gathered captains. "But they do not understand humans very well. When someone builds a cage around us, we do not sit quietly. We find a way to break out." His flagship, the UES Defiance, was a new type of warship designed specifically for fighting an enemy with superior technology. It was small, fast, and built with human creativity rather than hegemony perfection. Where their ships were elegant and efficient, his was ugly and stubborn. Meanwhile, Dr. Hana was trapped on the hegemony research station as it moved to a quarantine position around Earth. But her months of study had taught her something the hegemony did not know she knew. The crystal communication devices responded to human DNA in ways their creators had never intended. She managed to send a secret message to Yang using the station's own equipment. "The gates can be reversed," her message said. "Human genetics trigger responses they never programmed. We can turn their own network against them." Yang smiled when he received the message. He immediately began planning Operation Breakthrough, a coordinated attack designed to free humanity from its galactic prison. The first strike came without warning. Yang's hidden fleet emerged from asteroid belts and behind moons, attacking hegemony patrol ships with weapons designed to exploit weaknesses Hana had discovered in their historical records. The aliens had not fought a real war in thousands of years. Their ships were built to intimidate and control, not to engage with desperate enemies who had nothing left to lose. On New Eden, Park Jinsu received Yang's coded transmission and smiled for the first time in weeks. "All colonists to emergency stations," he announced over the colony's communication system. "It is time to remind the galaxy what humans do when someone tries to put us in a cage." Across dozens of worlds, human settlements erupted in coordinated rebellion. They used mining equipment as weapons, converted civilian ships into fighters, and turned their own colonies into fortresses. The hegemony had expected humans to submit quietly once they were isolated. Instead, they found themselves fighting a species that became more dangerous when cornered. Dr. Hana activated her plan from inside the research station. Using her access to the hegemony's historical archives and her understanding of the Gate network, she began sending signals to every quarantined species in the galaxy. Her message was simple but powerful. Remember who you used to be. The door the hegemony had slammed shut was about to be torn off its hinges, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Dr. Kim Hana's fingers moved quickly across the control panel of the hegemony research station. Around her, alien technicians worked at their stations, unaware that she was using their own equipment to send the most dangerous message in galactic history. Her signal reached across thousands of star systems, carried by the same network the hegemony used to control their member species. "People of the galaxy," her transmission began, You were not always as you are now. You had dreams. You had fire. You had the courage to reach for the stars. Remember. On the distant world of Vorthak Prime, an old farmer named Kethra stopped, working in his assigned field. For a moment something stirred in his mind, a memory of his grandfather telling stories about the old days when his people built ships and explored unknown worlds. The memory felt like waking up from a long dream. Across the galaxy, similar moments of awakening began to occur. The Zelthari factory workers remembered their warrior ancestors. The Kalani miners recalled when their people had been proud traders, who negotiated with equals rather than taking orders from overseers. Colonel Yang watched the battle displays on his ship's command center as reports came in from across human space. His hidden fleet was winning victories against hegemony patrols, but the real success was coming from the colonies themselves. Human settlements were proving impossible to control. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving signals from non-human sources. Some of the other species are starting to fight back too." Yang smiled grimly. Hana's plan is working. The hegemony kept their slaves peaceful by making them forget they were slaves. But humans are very good at reminding people of uncomfortable truths. On New Eden, Colony Administrator Park Jinsu stood on the walls of his settlement as hegemony peacekeeping ships approached. But these were not the same ships that had enforced quarantine a month ago. These vessels moved differently, their formations ragged and uncertain. "Incoming transmission," his communications officer announced. The holographic figure that appeared was one Park had never seen before, a creature that looked like a walking tree, but with scars across its bark and fire in its ancient eyes. "Humans of New Eden," the figure said. "I am Commander Yilthon of the Zelthari Liberation Fleet. My people have remembered what we lost. We offer alliance against our common oppressor." Similar scenes played out across dozens of human colonies. Species that had been peaceful workers for centuries were building ships, training soldiers, and remembering how to fight. The galaxy was waking up from a 10,000-year sleep. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Their enforcement fleets moved to crush the rebellions before they could spread further. But they faced a problem they had never encountered. Before, they were fighting enemies who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Dr. Hana activated the final phase of her plan from the research station. Using her access to the central gate network, she began systematically opening every quarantine barrier in the galaxy. The prison walls that had kept species isolated from each other for millennia began to crumble. "Freedom," she broadcast in 1,000 languages, "is not something that can be given to you. It is something you must take for yourself." The hegemony's perfect order collapsed like a house built from paper. Species that had been separated for centuries made contact with each other. They shared stories, compared experiences, and realized that they had all been victims of the same lie. Captain Park Jinwoo, Yang's son, led a combined fleet of human and alien ships toward the hegemony's central command world. His vessel, the U.S. Liberation, flew alongside Zelthari warships, Vorthak explorers, and Kalani trading vessels converted for battle. "This is Captain Park of the Liberation Alliance," he broadcast to the hegemony fleet that rose to meet them. "You have kept the galaxy in chains for 10,000 years. Today, those chains are broken." The battle was fierce, but brief. The hegemony's ships were designed to intimidate and control, not to fight desperate enemies who had rediscovered their courage. One by one, the silver vessels surrendered or fled. On the command world, the Silver Woman stood in her crystal tower as reports of defeat poured in from across the galaxy. Her black eyes showed something they had not displayed in millennia: fear. "How?" she whispered to her advisors. "How did one primitive species destroy everything we built?" The answer came from Dr. Hana, whose transmission reached even the hegemony's inner sanctum. "You made us your enemy by trying to make us your slaves. But your real mistake was thinking that freedom is a weakness instead of a strength." The final surrender came not with a great battle, but with a simple message broadcast across the galaxy. The hegemony's leadership agreed to dissolve their authority and allow each species to govern itself. Colonel Yang stood on the bridge of his flagship as Liberation fleets celebrated across hundreds of star systems. Ambassador Li Sujin joined him, looking out at the stars that were no longer forbidden to humanity. "What happens now?" she asked. Yang smiled. "Now we do what humans have always done best. We explore, we compete, we argue and fight and make up, and build something better than what came before. And we make sure that no one ever tries to cage the galaxy again." The door that had been slammed shut was not just open now, it had been completely destroyed. In its place stood something the galaxy had never seen before, a community of free peoples who had chosen cooperation over control, diversity over uniformity, and freedom over safety. The age of enforced peace was over. The age of chosen liberty had begun.